Hello, friends, and welcome back to Market Shares. I'm your host, Tony Blodgett, and today I'm just going to cover a number of topics that I'm seeing in the headlines. And look, I got to be honest with you, there's no shortage of headlines to talk about in today's real estate market. I mean, with a new administration coming in, there's just been sweeping, changes all across the nation, many of them impacting housing and finance and a lot of things that we just don't know how they're going to play out over time. But I want to just mention a few things. Now, before I do, I want to point out this book over here. So if you look at my shelf, I got this book called Raving. It was one of the very first books that I was given when I got into the mortgage business. And I was at a sales rally just last week, and I asked everyone in the room to raise their hand on who had read this book. I assumed everybody had read it, but only 2 people raised their hand. And so I was surprised. I know it's a little bit older book, but I just want to give a quick shout out. That is a super skinny book. But man, if you want to really understand what giving your borrower a wow experience is really all about, and how to really create relationships and raving fans with your customers. Oh my gosh, like that is an easy read and something that everybody should read. That's why I have it on the bookshelf, and I was just surprised at how few people. So I had to call it out really quick. Check out Raving Fans if you've never read it. If you have read Raving Fans, give me a thumbs up or something down in the comments here if you're on YouTube, and let me know that you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so man, just crazy times here. I'm at the very end of January recording this, and lots in the news just in the first few days. Now, something that happened a few weeks ago that I want to call out first, which is the CFPB came out and they said that all medical debt needs to be removed from consumers' credit reports. This is huge. This is something that if you're not out talking about this with your clients on social media, to your real estate agents, this is a huge change and is definitely going to help a lot of people be able to get into a mortgage that maybe otherwise couldn't. And so any collections, any outstanding things like that of a medical nature are completely removed from people's credit reports. And really for some people, we know that one of the number one things, if not the number one thing that will put a family into bankruptcy is, a major unforeseen medical event. And even if it doesn't put them in bankruptcy, it can really damage their credit. And now there is new regulation taking that off their credit report. So big news. I'd be out talking about that and circling back to any clients who, had that as a challenge, and let them know to maybe take another look at qualifying. So make sure that you're fully up to speed on what's going on with that. And it's a great talking point when you're putting out your own content. Okay, so as you guys have seen, President Trump got into office and has signed, I don't even know how many executive orders, but one of them in particular, Trump issues an executive order, emergency price relief on housing. And, this covered a few other things besides housing, but I thought this was really interesting. And, I think to myself, I'm like, well, what can an executive order really do to help with, relief around housing? And as I read through the executive order, you kind of got to read between the lines here. But basically what it says is, hereby order all executive departments and agencies to deliver emergency relief. And a couple things that he mentions are eliminate unnecessary administrative expenses, eliminate counterproductive requirements that raise the cost of appliances, things like this, right? So when we think about, and we've had Anton on here before, right? We've talked about the cost, the real estate cost of building a new home, all those things. And there is a lot of red tape when it comes to the permitting process. There's a lot of regulations that frankly have to do, and I think one thing he said was eliminate climate policies. That's a very general statement, But look, there are a lot of regulations that we've seen over the last few years, and really more than that. I mean, over the last, 10, 15 years, quite frankly, that revolve around the use of natural gas, right? The efficiency of your appliances, the efficiency of your heating, air conditioning units. I know here in the state of Washington, at least, there's like a point system that gets applied to, your appliances, and, you're having to run your duct work, that used to always be up in the attic or down in the crawl space. Now it has to be in finished square footage of the home. And the list goes on of these types of things. And so as I read between the lines with this executive order, I think those are the things that they're targeting. What are the requirements that we have in place that are driving up the cost of home ownership? And it's estimated to be close to $50,000 added to the price of a home simply because of these additional regulatory requirements. Now, obviously, the flip side of that is, are some of these regulations, necessary? Is it imperative that we build homes that are energy efficient? I mean, there's definitely an argument for that, not just because of the environment, but just for the cost of maintaining, the home, right? Paying your PUD bill, things of that nature all come into play. But, I just wanted to call out that particular one because it definitely talks about housing specifically. And it's not really clear when you read the executive order what exactly he's talking about. So if I were you, I would read through that, especially if you work in housing, mortgage, real estate, and just understand that. But I just want to give you my take on kind of where they're going with this. I think it's about pulling back red tape, lowering regulations and requirements and restrictions, building, maybe the permitting process, maybe some of the, in some areas, like you have to do ecology studies and wetland studies and all these things. Now, some of that is important. Some of it, I've talked to a lot of builders. They feel like some of it's overboard. So maybe there's a happy medium that we find and we help drive down the cost. So that one was interesting. Now, just about a week ago, by the time this airs, maybe it's 2 weeks, but President Trump was speaking at the World Economic Forum. And I was actually traveling when this happened, and I saw a headline. Someone's TV was on in their office, and there was no sound on or anything, just the little bar that goes across the bottom, and it says President Trump demands lower interest rates. And I'm like, what is going on there? So that's what he said, right? In front of the World Economic Forum, he said that he would demand lower interest rates. I'm assuming what he means there is he will demand the Federal Reserve lower interest rates. But let's be honest, I mean, he doesn't really have the ability to actually do that. Matter of fact, even before the election, Jerome Powell was asked, at a number of, press conferences leading up to the election, if he, is under any pressure from the Biden administration, would he be, influenced by, Trump if he were to get in, so on and so forth. And he's made it very clear that, we are separate from the executive branch. We do not take direction from them. And, we will remain completely neutral and follow the data, when making the decisions on monetary policy. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, we do know that when Trump was in office before, he was very outspoken about Jerome Powell. I mean, he called him a buffoon at one point. I mean, told him he was mismanaging, what he was doing with interest rates, so on and so forth. And so, Jerome Powell's no different than anybody. He does have an ego. I think he is potentially open to, pressure, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. What does the rhetoric look like from the president, and does it have an impact on the Fed? Now, one thing the Fed can control is, some of the Fed presidents that get appointed that ultimately would be voting members. So, maybe there is some roundabout ways that he can influence who the decision makers are when it comes to Fed policy. I don't know all the intricacies there, but I do know that he has some control over that. He's made it very clear, even during the election, that he would not push to remove Jerome Powell. I don't even think he could if he wanted to. Jerome Powell was very quick in one of his press conferences. I think it was back in September or November, where he said, like, if Trump asks me to leave, I'm not leaving. So anyway, I just think it's interesting to make such a bold statement in front of the whole World Economic Forum that he's going to demand lower rates. And it's like, okay, I mean, as a mortgage professional, I'm like, awesome. Like, that sounds fantastic. But what's the reality of him being able to directly impact that? Time will tell, but keep an eye on that one. I thought it was interesting. New home sales finished the year up 9.3% year over year. So still very low numbers historically speaking. But it's the best year we've seen since 2021. Now, here's the thing I wanted to point out about this is, new home sales are up more than existing home sales. And part of the reason for this is because builders have an advantage. Now, I know as a mortgage professional, we get super frustrated when one of our clients looks at, new construction, and you think that, man, how is this lender, this builder's lender giving this amazing interest rate? They're quoting, 4.99 when rates are around 7%. And you go, it's just not possible. Well, what they're doing there, as many of you know, and some of you may not, is they do what's called a forward commitment. So, the builder will take some of the expected profits from that home, and they'll use that to buy the rate down, in bulk. So it doesn't have to be used as part of the credit towards the borrower to pay discount points. They've already paid up front to buy that rate down, and usually it's a chunk of money that they've reserved. Maybe it's $5 million or $10 million, of money that they have done a forward commitment on, paid those points up front, bought that interest rate down. And what it does, though, is it makes that home much more affordable. So it helps them move their inventory. It helps the borrower qualify for more of a home, obviously attracts buyers to the table. And to the builder, they don't have to drop the price of their home to get people to buy it. They can lower the interest rate and effectively do the same thing while keeping their sales prices higher, so that if interest rates do come back, affordability comes back, and demand comes back, they still have comparable sales to use to sell their homes. So it's kind of a thing that happens in the new construction space. But knowing that, it's no surprise to me that we see the new homes selling better because they're using those sorts of strategies to move their inventory. In addition to that, the builder can also pay incentives to that buyer, right? And that can be used to do a traditional, buy down of the interest rate, just paying discount points. It can be used to fund a temporary buy down, like a 2-1 buy down or a 1-0 buy down or a 3-2-1 buy down. All sorts of things that can be done there. So no surprise that, new homes are leading the way, but hey, highest number since 2021. I think that's good news overall for the housing market. We've continued to see home appreciation hold steady. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute as it relates to 2025 and what we think is going to happen there. But still really, really healthy, despite affordability being such a challenge for so many people. Now, on to more news. There's a lot here that I can't get into because it's just too much to talk about. But we're starting to see some impacts from the new administration in other areas. So, like, for instance, the Inspector General of HUD was fired, creating a pretty significant controversy, kind of a watchdog, if you will, at HUD. That was fired last Friday. And that's just one of many changes. And I think you're going to see more of this as you see kind of sweeping reform amongst all of these government agencies. And then, it's like, what's the impact of this going to be? What's it going to be on regulatory enforcement? What's it going to be on, some programs? Maybe these people were championing certain programs, and now with those people gone, we see that go away. Matter of fact, I was reading that there was over 100 programs that are looking at a potential immediate or short-term freeze as the administration evaluates these 100 programs. These are HUD programs, over 100 of them, some of them well known, like Section 8 housing and, some block grants and, just a number of different programs, many of which, when I was reading the list, seem to be in place to support low, moderate income or housing challenged families. Now, does that mean these will get eliminated? No, not necessarily, but even a temporary freeze on Section 8 as an example, which subsidizes rent for many, many families and would impact landlords as well that rely on those payments directly from the government, that could be a pretty huge impact. So just keep an eye on what happens there with all of these sweeping changes that we see. And we don't know what all the consequences are going to be, but, keep an eye on it, and we'll make sure here at Market Shares that we're doing some updates for you as we see some of the major stuff come along. So lastly, I just want to talk about what will happen with housing prices in 2025. Now, look, if you guys remember back in 2023, we did see a slight dip in pricing. And if you were, I think I talked about it at the time, like if you were to go on YouTube, I mean, there was so many doomsayers out there talking about the housing crash and the worst housing crash that we're going to see since 2008 or worse than the '08 housing crash. I mean, it's just, these same people have been saying this now for 5 years. So, but here's what we saw in reality. In 2023, when house prices dipped, rates were, really high, but it actually created activity. And it was a very short-lived dip in prices before they went right back up. And I think it was right around this time of year, right? Here we are in January, February. This is historically the slowest time of year. We have not yet seen, that spring inventory come on the market. So no surprise that people that need to sell in the middle of winter are going to list their homes at a little bit lower price. No surprise to this. So I guess I bring this up because there is some speculation that we see some softening in certain parts of the country with home prices if rates stay in this elevated 7% range, low sevens that we're in right now. At least that's the published average for interest rates right now. So if that continues, I think that we do see some markets that are soft because affordability is just so tough. But I wouldn't look too much into some of these reports that are coming out regarding new home prices or new listings, if you will, coming on a little bit below the numbers that we saw in 2024. Not super surprising to me, and I'm not yet ready to say that we see any marketed decline. Matter of fact, all the information that I've been talking about here on Market Shares is that, we still have super low inventory. We still have the lock-in effect. I don't see anything substantially changing that. And I do expect rates to steadily get better over time. I think there's still a ton of uncertainty in the market. No one quite knows what the impact of, there's a lot of rhetoric about tariffs and what are going to be the impact on inflation if these tariffs go into effect. I think a lot of them are being used as leverage, but maybe some of them, have to be put in place in order to back up the rhetoric. And so maybe in the short term, that does impact inflation. Maybe that's just absorbed by the companies and the countries that are being tariffed, so that they still have a competitive price when their product hits the U.S. market. We don't know. I mean, these are things that we don't know. But what we do know is that we don't know. And what I mean by that is there's no certainty as to what the impact. Some people say, the tariffs, inflation is going to go crazy. It's like, not necessarily. We don't know what changes might be made to the price of those goods in order to absorb the tariffs. We just don't know, right? It might create competition. There might be U.S. companies that, lower their prices or, build more of a particular product in order to compete and drive prices down. There's so many ways this could work out. And so what I encourage people to do is don't be so caught up in the headlines. Don't be so caught up in thinking that this is definitive. I mean, everything I've talked about today is like a moving target. All I'm encouraging people to do is be aware of these things that are going on, be knowledgeable about how they're unfolding. And they're great talking points, to talk to your clients and your referral partners and people about, so that, so people know what's going on, what's afoot, if you will. So keep that in mind. I did see that median home price is lower, but median home price being lower doesn't necessarily mean prices are going down. Now, it could indicate that prices are going down, but also keep in mind the median is not the average, right? So the average is you add up all the homes that sold, you divide it by the number of homes, and that's your average price. The median just means that, some are higher, some are lower, and this is the middle price. What I think might be happening that drove down the median price is that high-end homes, which we know don't sell nearly as well in a market where interest rates are really high. These are luxury homes. They're more of a want than a need. Many people aren't moving up because they're still in this lock-in effect with their low interest rates. So just less higher end homes being sold. So that doesn't mean that the price of an average home in your area, maybe you're in the Midwest and the average price is $250, $325, $400, maybe average prices have gone up, but maybe the high end just is seeing less activity, less higher end sales, pushing that median down, but not necessarily impacting the price of the average home that the average first-time home buyer wants to buy. So keep that in mind when you see median home price. It doesn't necessarily mean that prices are going down. There could be other factors driving that, and I personally think that there is other factors driving that in this particular case. So there we go, you guys. That was kind of my update for today. There's so many more things that I could have talked about as I did some research for this episode. Oh my gosh. I mean, if you're not subscribed to some of the major news outlets that talk about housing, I encourage you, to do that, right? I mean, whether it be Housing Wire or, Mortgage News or, all these different websites, I would say magazines, but most of them now are just online. But I think it's really important right now to be up on what's going on. There's so much happening. And as this stuff unfolds, I think that it's really important that we are educated on it. So hopefully this episode brought a few things to light, maybe gave you a few things to go research on your own. And if you just like to sit back and listen and take in this information, at least now you know a little bit more about what's going on with housing and the new administration and how it's all impacted and affected. So I hope you appreciated this update. I appreciate you taking the time to watch Market Shares. I appreciate you more letting other people in the industry know about what we're doing here at Market Shares. And if you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and do that. And then that way you will be notified when our new episodes drop every single Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.